Russia in the 18th century. To seize the Grand Duke, murder him pitilessly, would fully satisfy his hatred. Besides, with the capture of Irkutsk, all eastern Siberia would pass to the Tartars. "It shall be thus, Ivan," replied Feofar. "What are your orders, Takhsir?" "Today our headquarters shall be removed to Tomsk." Ogareff bowed, and followed by the Hosh Begui, he retired to execute the Emir's orders. As he was about to mount his horse, to return to the outposts, a tumult broke out at some distance, in the part of the camp reserved for the prisoners. Shouts were heard, and 2 or 3 shots fired. Perhaps it was an attempt at revolt or escape, which must be summarily suppressed. Ivan Ogareff and the Housch Begui walked forward, and almost immediately 2 men, whom the soldiers had not been able to keep back, appeared before them. The Housch Begui, without more information, made a sign which was an order for death, and the heads of the 2 prisoners would have rolled on the ground, had not Ogareff uttered a few words which arrested the sword already raised aloft. The Russian had perceived that these prisoners were strangers, and he ordered them to be brought to him. They were Harry Blount and Alcide Jolivet. On Ogareff's arrival in the camp, they had demanded to be conducted to his presence. The soldiers had refused. In consequence, a struggle, an attempt at flight, shots fired which happily missed the 2 correspondents, but their execution would not have been long delayed, if it had not been for the intervention of the Emir's lieutenant. The latter observed the prisoners for some moments, they being absolutely unknown to him. They had been present at that scene in the post house at Ichim, in which Michael Strogoff had been struck by Ogareff, but the brutal traveler had paid no attention to the persons then collected in the common room. Blount and Jolivet on the contrary recognized him at once, and the latter said in a low voice, "Hello! It seems that Colonel Ogareff and the rude personage of Ichim are one." Then he added in his companion's ear, "Explain our affair, Blount. You will do me a service. This Russian colonel in the midst of a Tartar camp disgusts me, and although, thanks to him, my head is still on my shoulders, my eyes would exhibit my feelings were I to attempt to look him in the face." So saying, Alcide Jolivet assumed a look of complete and haughty indifference. Whether or not Ivan Ogareff perceived that the prisoner's attitude was insulting towards him, he did not let it appear. "Who are you, gentlemen?" he asked in Russian, in a cold tone, but free from its usual rudeness. "2 correspondents of English and French newspapers," replied Blount laconically. "You have, doubtless, papers which will establish your identity?" "Here are letters which accredit us in Russia, from the English and French chancellor's office." Ivan Ogareff took the letters which Blount held out, and read them attentively. "You ask," said he, "authorization to follow our military operations in Siberia?" "We ask to be free, that is all," answered the English correspondent dryly. "You are so, gentlemen," answered Ogareff. "I am curious to read your articles in the Daily Telegraph." "Sir," replied Blount, with the most imperturbable coolness, "it is 6d. a number, including postage." And therefore he returned to his companion, who appeared to approve completely of his replies. Ivan Ogareff, without frowning, mounted his horse, and going to the head of his escort, soon disappeared in a cloud of dust. "Well, Jolivet, what do you think of Colonel Ivan Ogareff, General in Chief of the Tartar troops?" asked Blount. "I think, my dear friend," replied Alcide, smiling, "that the Housch Begui made a very graceful gesture when he gave the order for our heads to be cut off." Whatever was the motive which led Ogareff to act thus in regard to the 2 correspondents, they were free and could rove at their pleasure over the scene of war. Their intention was not to leave it. The sort of antipathy which formerly they had entertained for each other had given place to a sincere friendship. Circumstances having brought them together, they no longer thought of separating. The petty questions of rivalry were forever extinguished. Harry Blount could never forget what he owed his companion, who, on the other hand, never tried to remind him of it. This friendship, too, assisted the reporting operations, and was thus to the advantage of their readers. "And now," asked Blount, "what shall we do with our liberty?" "Take advantage of it, of course," replied Alcide, "and go quietly to Tomsk to see what is going on there. "Until the time very near, I hope when we may rejoin some Russian regiment?" "As you say, my dear Blount, it won't do to Tartarize ourselves too much. The best side is that of the most civilized army, and it is evident that the people of Central Asia will have everything to lose and absolutely nothing to gain from this invasion, while the Russians will soon repulse them. It is only a matter of time." The arrival of Ivan Ogareff, which had given Jolivet and Blount their liberty, was to Michael Strogoff, on the contrary, a serious danger. Should chance bring the Czar's courier into Ogareff's presence, the latter could not fail to recognize in him the traveler whom he had so brutally treated at the Ishim post house, and although Michael had not replied to the insult as he would have done under any other circumstances, attention would be drawn to him, and at once the accomplishment of his plans would be rendered more difficult. This was the unpleasant side of the business. A favorable result of his arrival, however, was the order which was given to raise the camp that very day, and remove the headquarters to Tomsk. This was the accomplishment of Michael's most fervent desire. His intention, as has been said, was to reach Tomsk concealed amongst the other prisoners, that is to say, without any risk of falling into the hands of the scouts who swarmed about the approaches to this important town. However, in consequence of the arrival of Ivan Ogareff, he questioned whether it would not be better to give up his first plan and attempt to escape during the journey. Michael would, no doubt, have kept to the latter plan had he not learned that Feofar Khan and Ogareff had already set out for the town with some thousands of horsemen. "I will wait, then," said he to himself, "at least until some exceptional opportunity for escape occurs. The adverse chances are numerous on this side of Tomsk, while beyond I shall in a few hours have passed the most advanced Tartar posts to the east. Still 3 days of patience, and may God aid me." It was indeed a journey of 3 days which the prisoners, under the guard of a numerous detachment of Tartars, were to make across the steppe. 150 versts lay between the camp and the town, an easy march for the Emir's soldiers, who wanted for nothing, but a wretched journey for these people enfeebled by privations. More than one corpse would show the road they had traversed. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on the 12th of August, under a hot sun and cloudless sky, that the Toptsy Bashi gave the order to start. Alcide and Blount, having bought horses, had already taken the road to Tomsk, where events were to reunite the principal personages of this story. Amongst the prisoners brought by Ivan Ogareff to the Tartar camp was an old woman, whose taciturnity seemed to keep her apart from all those who shared her fate. Not a murmur issued from her lips. She was like a statue of grief. This woman was more strictly guarded than any one else, and without her appearing to notice, was constantly watched by the Tsigane Sangarre. Notwithstanding her age, she was compelled to follow the convoy of prisoners on foot, without any alleviation of her suffering. However, a kind Providence had placed near her a courageous, kind-hearted being to comfort and assist her. Amongst her companions in misfortune a young girl, remarkable for beauty and taciturnity, seemed to have given herself the task of watching over her. No words had been exchanged between the two captives, but the girl was always at the old woman's side when help was useful. At first the mute assistance of the stranger was accepted with some mistrust. Gradually, however, the young girl's clear glance, her reserve, and the mysterious sympathy which draws together those who are in misfortune, thawed Marfa Strogoff's coldness. Nadia, for it was she, was thus able, without knowing it, to render to the mother those attentions which she had herself received from the son. Her instinctive kindness had doubly inspired her. In devoting herself to her service, Nadia secured to her youth and beauty the protection afforded by the age of the old prisoner. On the crowd of unhappy people, embittered by sufferings, this silent pair, one seeming to be the grandmother, the other the granddaughter, imposed a sort of respect. After being carried off by the Tartar scouts on the Irtych, Nadia had been taken to Omsk. Kept prisoner in the town, she shared the fate of all those captured by Ivan Ogareff, and consequently that of Marfa Strogoff. If Nadia had been less energetic, she would have succumbed to this double blow. The interruption to her journey, the death of Michael, made her both desperate and excited. Divided, perhaps forever, from her father.